one thing I would say is you have so much to give. So just give it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stay focused on, stay focused with God and stay focused on your mission, like define what your mission is. Again, if it's for instant success, then I can't help you with that. Because podcasting is not an instant success.
Right.
It's not going to make you a millionaire overnight or ever for some. So it's like, what are you doing these things for? So define what you're doing them for, and then just order your steps. Ask God to order your steps in that way, and surround yourself with people who can encourage you.
Hey, queens. Yeah, you know who you are. God, come on. Go ahead and put that crown on your head. Now tilt a little to the left. Now a little to the right. Perfect. Now let's get to work. Because we know you got big goals. And you got big dreams and not afraid to let them know. Why? Because you step into your purpose. You speak out on your faith. And you shift up in your journey. Because you a boss. Welcome to the podcast Drop the Expiring Act with your host Veli of QueenBayGoals.com, reminding you that you are a queen before anything else. It's your life and your goals. Make it royal. All right, y'all. Go ahead and work that crown. Hey, Queen Bays. Welcome to another episode of the Drop the Inspiring Act podcast. Today we are talking with author, entrepreneur, and podcast host Tiffany Obeng. So, Tiffany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So it's like, where do I start? So I'm an author, first time or debut author. My first book, Andrew Learns About Actors, came out last September 2020, and it did really well. It hit #2 on the Amazon bestsellers list. And thank you. And so I'm just trying to grow it because it is a series. And so I have another book coming out soon, but I'm sure we'll get to that. And then I'm also a podcast host of a TV and film review podcast. Me and my good friend of over 20 years love watching some of the same TV shows, love talking about them. And I was like, girl, let's put this on podcast. So I do that as well. But my day-to-day is I am an equal employment opportunity advocate. And so I work in that space. Mm-hmm. So I work in that space on a day-to-day basis.
Where do you find the time?
Well, that's my day job. That's what pays the bills. So I can do books. And of course, I'm a wife and a mother. Well, I don't know if that's of course, but I am a wife and a mother. So yeah, that's me, I think, in a nutshell.
Okay, so you said, and I want to get into this because you said you were aspiring for 30 years before you said, you know what, I'm going to write this book. So what was going on? What happened in that 30 years?
Girl, and I was telling my age. I'm like, should I say it?
So it's okay.
So what was happening in that time was just making up excuses. I don't have the time to do it. So I'm a lawyer by trade, which means you have a lot of schooling, including, law school and college, law school and so forth. And so I was like, oh, that's what I'm focused on. Let me just get my schooling. Because my mom's like, you need to go ahead and write your book. You need to go ahead and write your book.
I love mom.
When I have time. Tell me when I got time. So that was an excuse. I don't have the time. And then when you start working full time, I don't have time. This is what pays my bills. I got my health insurance this way. So when do I have time, Mom? And then you start, having a family. When do I have time? So now, so it's always, when do I have time? But really that's couched in just fear, going to the theme, fear and failure. Don't know where to start. Don't know what I don't know or how to start. And just like, okay, well, if I put a work out there, that means I'm being vulnerable. And people can criticize it. And, the infamous Erykah Badu had her famous line, I'm sensitive about my stuff.
Right.
So I had to deal with that or just getting the mind frame of overcoming that. So what finally happened and just triggered it and said, okay, let's just do this. The pandemic. It was the pandemic. The pandemic slowed everything down. Thankfully, me and my husband are still employed, but we went from working, or I went from working on site to now teleworking full time. And so before that, it was March. There's a lot of Mayday going on. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And I had a lot of time to be quiet and to be still. And it just God was like, let's move forward. Like, what are we waiting on? Like, what other time than the present? You had money saving up. Well, for us, we had money saving up because it wasn't going anywhere. You couldn't go anywhere. The outside's closed. So I said, you know what, Mom? I'm gonna finally write my book. And she was like, what?
So she was happy about that.
Yeah. She was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And another thing, and I know this is gonna sound crazy, I haven't told anyone before, so my mom, I know exclusive girl. So so my mom had asked over and over and over, like, when are you gonna write your book? And she's a breast cancer survivor. And I told her that in my head, I felt like when I finally wrote a book that she might pass or something. So I know it's morbid, but I'm just like, write it, then she'll be here. For some reason, that was tied together. Like, that's why she's holding on or something. I don't know. She's been free of breast cancer for over 10 years.
Oh, awesome.
So, so it got quiet, and I just was praying about it and just, going on my spiritual journey. And it was like, what other time in the present? My friend who published the book, but she had like a small independent press that helped her along in that process. I was trying to go through them, but they had closed submissions maybe. I don't know, but it just was a wall. So I was like, what am I supposed to do now? So I went to Facebook, and they have groups, of course, self-published authors and all that. And so I started like joining those groups, and everybody asked questions and provide answers. And I was like, oh, so I can do this by
myself. Right.
And
I love it.
My husband had always been a proponent of it. He was almost as bad as my mom, but just not as around as my mom. So she's had 30 years to nag me. He's had like 10. So a lot of encouragement and just saying, let's just do it. Let's get over it. What's the worst that can happen?
So I love that you mentioned God. I love that you mentioned you had your God talk moments. So in your intake form, that's what I want to talk about. What was going on with your talks with God that you said, led you to say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write this book?
Girl, so me and God be talking like homegirls like this, okay? So I'm like, I don't know how he sounds to you, but to me, he be breaking it down. So, and I need that. So with the book, it was more of just guiding me into the direction of how to start on the path of publishing the book. So finding the Facebook groups, how to find the illustrator. Do I need to copyright? Like my brother was the one that told me about, he was like, you're going to copyright your book? And I was like, oh no. So just simply that idea in my mind so I could research it and do it. And thank goodness I do have that, lawyer analytical research background because that's what I do. So anywho, so he just kept me on the path or whatever, and then just having the conversation about what does the success look like? And this was a conversation I had about the podcast and being an author. Like, okay, well, you're scared to put out the book, but why? And I'm like, because, it's my stuff. And what if people don't like it or they criticize it? And he's like, okay.
Have some edges and be like, girl.
Girl. People do like it. Like, what is your goal in doing this book? Are you doing the goal because you want money and fame? Like, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve in doing this book? I'm like, well, one, I'm trying to, fulfill a lifelong goal. That's one. He's like, okay, we'll check. What's scary about that? And then it's like, well, two, I want to put out a product that other Black kids could relate to and learn from. So something educational, something fun, and something that they can see themselves in. And he's like, okay. And so he's like, well, if you're like, so what's the fear part? Like you can control those things or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And I will say, so far, reviews have said like, my kids see themselves in your illustrations. And I'm like, thank you so much. Or
I love it.
Such a fun journey. I'm like, yay. But anyway, so just talking and like, okay, well, this is what I'm scared of. And him being like, that ain't nothing. And I'm like, okay, well, when it came to launching it in September, I was like, well, I was trying to push it for August before everybody went back to school because I was like, well, nobody's going to care. They're going to be focused on adjusting to remote learning and all those things. And he was like, no, they're not. I mean, like people buy books all the time. And I'm like, yes, they are, right? Because they're going to be so busy just thinking about how do I do my kid. And it was like, no. And even my mom like reaffirmed because she's a teacher. And so my mom was like, no, girl, you'll be fine. So I took my time. I didn't rush it out in August and I put it out in September. And like they said, I was just fine. Now with the podcast, that was funnier because as you know, that was more of a whim. So I was listening to podcasts. Some of the podcasts I listened to are the Read, I can say, right? I can say their names. Okay. The Read, Black Therapy for Black Girls, the Black Girl Podcast, and
I listened to that one.
Yeah. And so just hearing these people talk, Jesus and Jollof. Okay. So just listening to people have conversations or whatever that I was interested in hearing, and particularly the Read, because they were just so down to earth. And so our podcast doesn't curse or anything. We're not explicit or anything, because I wanted to make sure that if you wanted to listen to it in the car with your kids, you could.
Yeah.
Because I can't listen to the Read in the car with my kids. So, yes, I was just in the car, I was driving, and I think me and my friend was trying to schedule to just have our conversation about TV or something, because that's what we would do. When we left work, we would like debrief on This Is Us or Queen Sugar, or whatever, like, girl, what you think about that episode? And we'll break it all the way down to the ground, okay? So
I love it.
I was driving, and I was like, no, that's not what happened. I was driving, but before I was driving, I was taking a walk during the early parts of the pandemic, and I was listening to the Read, and the Read had an ad for Anchor.
Oh, okay.
That's what
I use Anchor.
Yes, and they were like, he was like, it's free to use, and da 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 da. And I'm like, huh? It is?
Yeah.
So I'm like, and so then I'm driving in my car, and I'm just thinking about like, me and my friend Ricky, that's what she goes by, Ricky. I'm like, me and my friend Ricky, we really be having a fun time, like breaking down these movies. And I also do it at work. When I was going into work, I'll have little groups of people that will sit around and be like, what you thought about the show? I was like, oh, let me tell you, or whatever. So I was like, I don't know if we'll have a following or anything, but what's the worst that can happen? That was actually the conclusion of the conversation I was having with God. Because I was like, okay, well, if we do a podcast, nobody's going to listen. And he's like, but if you don't do it, how are you going to know?
Exactly.
What's the listen?
Girl, I love you, God. He be snatching your edges.
And again, he was like, what do you want from it? And I'm like, well, I just want us to have a good time. And there's no loss here. Like, there's no money I have to put up for anything except for like stuff. But there wasn't any real money I have to put up, just learning Anchor, getting her on board or whatever, which was a little bit hard. But she was like, okay, I'll join you for the journey, girl.
I love it.
Girl, just like once a week, but that's turned into multiple times a week. But anywho.
I have a question that is like so off topic. So have you guys talked about Bridgerton yet?
Girl, okay, so that's not one of our shows. I have watched it, and I have had my Facebook opinions, unpopular opinions, but no, that's not one of our shows. Currently, our shows are This Is Us and Sisters, Tyler Perry Sisters.
I haven't watched that yet. I have that on my list to watch.
Yeah, girl. So, and it's funny how that came about, Sisters, because we were like, well, I was adamant that I wasn't going to talk about any Tyler Perry TV shows or films, but the pandemic had disrupted production. But Tyler Perry was still steaming ahead. So we were like, okay.
Girl.
So that's how we ended up with Sisters. But we are doing This Is Us right now, which is currently on like a 2-3 week break. So Sisters keep coming on in because Tyler Perry's making them work. And I'm like, well, then Queen Sugar about to start back.
I love that. And what's the other one that comes on with Queen Sugar? Oh,
it used to be Greenleaf, and that's where we started. We started out with Greenleaf.
Yeah, I used to watch them both. I love those. Me and my husband, we record all of them so that we can watch it back to back. But let's bring it a little bit back.
I know.
It sounds like we can go on forever. But what would you say to the author or the aspiring author who is still in their heads and still has that fair talk going on? Like, what would you say to that person to tell them, you know what, you just need to drop your aspiring act and be an author? What would you say to that person?
I would say it's two things. I came up with a quote, and I actually put it on Canva with my name on it just in case it blew up or something. And I was like, no, y'all gonna know that was mine, okay? Let me see. I have to see what it is. I think it's profound. It got a lot of views. So let me see. Okay. It said, when you try something new, you realize you have skills and abilities that you never before tapped into. So unlock your potential. And I put that out there. I know. So that's what I would say. One thing I would say is you have so much to give. So just give it. And if you stay focused on, stay focused with God and stay focused on your mission, like define what your mission is. Again, if it's for instant success, then I can't help you with that. Because podcasting is not an instant success. Right. It's not going to make you a millionaire overnight or ever for some. So it's like, what are you doing these things for? So define what you're doing them for. And then just order your steps. Ask God to order your steps in that way and surround yourself with people who can encourage you. It's just been so interesting that on this journey, I've been so fulfilled because like my brothers, I'm the youngest of two brothers. And you're like, oh my gosh, I admire you so much.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm like, me? I'm your little sister. What are you talking about? The one you was tossing in boxes when I was a kid. Like,
oh, God. I'm glad I was older then.
So just hearing stuff like that, or like your friends or my cousins or just whoever, just confirming like you're doing something good. Like if you start and just go ahead, what's going to come is going to come. You're going to have a product that you're proud of, put out a product you're proud of, and the rest is history, literally. Right. And the other thing I would say to them is, you're scared of failure. And it's true that you can try something new and you can fail. But if you don't try something new, then you can never succeed either. So just like you said, just do it. Like, let's just do it and see what happens. The worst that can happen is failure, and failure teaches you lessons. Or failure could be someone else's motivation, actually. Just to see like, well, you put yourself out there, you're still living, keep going. You know what I'm saying? Like there's been other things I did that I wasn't even thinking about. I didn't do anything to this magnitude of like being an author or whatever, but like I got into the wine business and was like selling wine for some company or whatever. My goal in doing that was just to become more comfortable speaking in front of people or whatever, like sales type stuff. And because that's not a skill of mine. And so that's why I had done that. And they were like, you're always thinking of something to do. You're always hustling. I'm like, me? I'm a hustler? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay.
You are.
Like, I'll just be sitting chilling. I thought, I was like, no, you're always putting yourself out there. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. But yeah, so those things. And then another quote I really like, and it's not mine. It's Marianne Wilson. I think that's her last name. But it's that one where it says, our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate.
Oh, girl. That was for the end of the podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry, girl.
I had it saved because I did.
Yes, so we'll save it.
Just taking us straight to the end.
Oh, sorry. I'm not trying
to. All right, it's okay. So before we go,
that one's so good.
Well, you were just talking, guys, all the gems, you're going to have to go back and listen to this podcast episode like 2 or 3 times because she just said a whole lot of gems that you guys need to listen to. So definitely go back and listen to this podcast. You have a blog called the Blog Tea. Tell us about that because I'm like, I loved it when I saw the name. Tell us about that.
So yeah, it's the True Tea, TEA, but the TEA stands for Truth, Errors, and Accomplishments.
I loved it when I saw it.
Yay! See, this type of stuff. This is affirmations for me. Like, oh, you're doing something right to somebody. So that just takes people who read the blog on the journey of how, like, first it introduces myself. So the intro blog post was, who am I? Who is this person you're following along or whatever? So it takes you through that and how I got out real quickly out of the proverbial fear of corner of fear. Corner of fear, yes. And then I just try to put little tips on there of like, this is what I learned along the journey of publishing my book. So other people who may be interested in publishing their book can say, okay, like I have a post on there about ISBNs versus barcodes.
Right, I saw that. I'm like, I was looking at like the different blog posts that you had. I'm like, is she on the journey to be a book coach next? Because you are like giving away all the gems on how to publish a children's book. I'm serious. I'm like, that should be like a next lane for you.
You're the second person that said that in like a 2-week span. No, in a 3-day span. She was like, girl, you need to coach people. And I'm like, I'm not there yet, I don't think. But you never know. See, this might be God trying to say, step out of your own way and tell them, do it. But yes, I did that one. And I try to do it in a way that I think, I do it in the way I talk. So like, girl, let me tell you about these ISBNs.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. That's why I wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, and so the recent one you may have seen was the copyrights or whatever. And so the next one I'm gonna do, I can't figure out which one is more important, but it's just so many questions you have when you're on the author journey. And so I'm trying to pick out the pertinent ones, and I only publish like once a month a blog post. And so the next one I was thinking about doing was like my imprints is Sugar Cookie Books. So it's like, do people know what an imprint is? No. So I'm thinking about talking about imprint versus publishing company versus incorporating your imprint or publishing company, and how I got to the point of just saying I'm gonna do an imprint. I was thinking about doing that one. Or one about social media. A lot of people say like, oh, your social media page, do you use your author name? Do you use something creative or topic? Because my social media page for my books is inspiring kids to aspire or whatever. And so it's one of those I'm gonna do. But yeah, so my blog post is just taking people, readers through the trials, like what was my hiccups and what did I learn and what did I accomplish along the way.
So I'm following, just so you know. So in 2019, I did my first children's book. I self-published on Amazon because I've been writing since I was a kid, and I just like have like all my notebooks all over the place with things that I've written, and I've just never published it. And I just finally did it in 2019.
Yay!
Yeah, so I'm following because I'm like when I saw the blog that you had, I'm like reading all the posts. So definitely, I love it. So I'll continue to write. I'm going to be continuing to read those blog posts every month. And if I don't see it, I'm going to come for you.
And you're going to continue to put out your next book.
Well, I have to do that too. Yeah, I have to do that too. I have to start motivating myself to do it again. All right. So where can our listeners find you? Because all the gems you're dropping, where can they find you so that they can catch those gems on a regular?
I know. Hopefully I wasn't rambling because I get excited, girl. So,
okay.
Like I said, the author page is at Inspiring Kids to Aspire. That's on Facebook and Instagram. And I just got on Instagram last weekend. And let me tell you why real quick. So I have been like, I'm not getting on Instagram. I'm just going to stay with Facebook. That's what I know, right? And I was really adamant about that. But this week, I launched a project or effort to highlight our Black kids. Did you know our Black kids are doing so much? They're like kid bosses and kid authors and kid this and that.
You know Marley Diaz? She published a book a couple years back. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. But she used to read, like, she actually did a campaign to get more Black books in schools because all the books are like white boys and dogs. So she started a whole campaign to get more Black books with more Black faces for the kids to read in school. And she was like 12 when she did it.
Wow.
She's probably older now.
That is so amazing. And so I was like, Black History Month is coming up. I want to do like posts to educate people. But then something was said to me, oh God, because it was like Saturday morning before I had to do an author event. And I was like, instead of doing the people that everyone already know or may know, why don't we do a twist on it and do kids or whatever, highlight kids or whatever. So I have this effort going on called Black Kids Making History Month.
I love it.
Or Black History Month Kids Edition. And so I was like, well, let me get on Instagram so I can try to have the biggest span of promoting these kids or getting these kids seen. And I also had a 3-minute pitch with Black baby books on Instagram on Monday. And so I was like, well, I might want to get on there just for that too, but I wasn't even worried about that. So anyway,
good luck. Good luck.
I'm now there. So Inspiring Kids to Aspire. My podcast pages are on Facebook and Instagram. Spoiler alert, Tiff L. Ricky. And my website is sugarcookiebooks.com. Also, a blog post will come about how do you decide on a name, you know?
I love it. And you guys, you don't have to remember all the things. All the things will be posted in the description, so you can just click on the links because I know it's a lot. But girl, and I can see you doing a blog, an author coaching business in the future. I'm just going to put it out there.
I'll receive it and pray on it and see what happens.
Okay. Well, you keep me posted. All right. So we always end the podcast with a quote. So you can go ahead now and take it away with that quote by Marianne Williamson.
Okay. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Ooh, girl, I love it. I love it.
It's so accurate too, man.
Right.
so profound. Okay.
So this was a great episode, you guys. Make sure you go back and listen for all the gems. Like I said, you might have to listen once, twice, 3 times. I don't know. But go back and listen and catch all the gems. So I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. All right,
Bye.
guys. You have been listening to another episode of Drop the Aspiring Act. If you're looking for more information of this podcast and other episodes, please visit queenbaygoals.com.